I'll take you over there. I'll take you.
You guys think you're a big drug busting out
I think they call that winding way. Across the river is
Right at the 3 days.
exactly. By where I live, you hear all this noise.
They did excavate too at Winding Bay.
Surprised me. Yeah, that would not surprise me. But they would be doing that where I am, right? There's a huge drop off. I mean, if you know that area, huge drop off.
Yeah. Some of those things sort of not properly.
All of the residents in the community. And obviously, this is the largest contamination spill that we've dealt with as a state. There's been a lot of concern relative to air quality, groundwater quality, home values. So I think that to varying degrees, everyone has had an impact as a result of the incident.
We are all committed to making sure that we stay here to clean up this river. And so here we are again a year later. And I hope that this film was a good reminder of where we were a year ago. And we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go until we're done. Here's a picture of the infamous lily pad area above the dam. Not too long after the spill, as you may recall, the vegetation, the aquatic vegetation in that area trapped oil, and it was very heavily oiled in that area. By fall, the majority of the oil was gone, and much of the dredging work there had been completed. But work crews had already started work on submerged oil recovery along the north bank of the river, where you can see those booms. Today, a little more than a year after the spill, there are still 1,000 EPA, state, local, and Enbridge personnel and contractors currently working on the river. At the height of the response last September, there were as many as 2,500 people working on the river.
When the spill occurred, the Kalamazoo River was in a heavy flood stage. I think most of you know that. And that caused a situation where water was over the banks, islands were submerged, peninsulas were submerged. And so when the oil came down the river from the broken pipeline, it overflowed the banks, it covered the islands, and progressed in a manner such as this. Once the floodwaters began to recede, what we ended up with were areas where we call these areas overbank areas, and they were sometimes in a floodplain, islands that were previously submerged, and depositional areas behind dams where oil was trapped by the receding floodwaters. And much of the cleanup work that Enbridge has performed today pursuant to EPA's order is in these types of areas, overbanks, islands, and in depositional areas where submerged oil has come to reside. Another way that oil was...
talking briefly about work that lots and lots of people participated in, not just Fish and Wildlife Service, but DNR, DEQ, the tribes, NOAA, USDA, Enbridge and their contractors as we work to try and minimize the impacts to wildlife, to rescue, rehabilitate, and release wildlife that were impacted by the oil, and as we move forward in trying to assess what it's going to take to restore this river system.
And as was mentioned, since I am the last speaker, I do expect a hearty round of applause when I am finished. But I'm very glad to see all of you here tonight. My name is Paul McCoskey. I'm the Director of Environmental Health with the Calhoun County Public Health Department. And I think I have some good news for you. But these are the things that we are going to be talking about tonight. First of all, we want to talk about the status of the drinking water and the sampling program, contact issues that may exist with the submerged oil, the air monitoring, sample, and complaint response, as well as an update on what's going on with the health of the fish in the river and where the fish advisories stand at this point in time. So we'll start off with the first one, which is the drinking water well sampling. Just to let you know some details here, we have 167 wells that are included in the program. Most of these are wells that are located within 200 feet of the high water mark that we had when the spill first occurred. And these are wells that were picked because they are in an exact place that we need to have them be to detect problems early, or that they are susceptible wells, places that we can detect problems early. The second point here is that this well sampling is ongoing. It's occurring all the time, and it probably is going to for the foreseeable future. There is no compromise to public health, and we're going to be taking all the steps and all the sampling and monitoring necessary to assure that. The third point is that this has been going on for a very long period of time, and that the data that we have is very solid. So the conclusions that we're drawing are really appropriate. The results from the drinking water well sampling is that when we were looking for the crude oil-related chemicals that were in the samples, basically we found nothing that was above the exceedances of the state drinking water standards. So this is very, very good news. Number two, the homeowners and the county health department, we receive a letter for each test result, so we can keep tabs on what's going on. And we certainly want to make sure that the public and all homeowners know exactly what's going on and have a recourse and a source to go to if they have questions. The wells have also been installed to monitor the groundwater. These were ones that were put in specifically to monitor areas where they may not have been an appropriate well. The next one is something I think a lot of you were interested in, and this is the contact with the submerged oil and the sediment. And the idea behind this, and one of the early concerns was if people come in contact with the chemicals that are in the oil that's remaining in the river, the submerged oil, what effects are there? And I have to compliment a number of partners, but especially the people from the Michigan Department of Community Health, who did an absolutely excellent job in putting this together. But what they were trying to do was figuring out, this very, very simple formula on the bottom, that exposure, how often and how much a person is exposed to the potential contamination from the submerged oil. What is the actual hazard with that submerged oil? And that comes up with what we have determined to be the risk. So what we've come up with is an idea of what the exposure is. If people having skin contact with and or accidentally eating the submerged oil, not that I don't think anybody's going to try a glass full of this, but if you're having a picnic or something, you might have some accidental ingestion. And we wanted to figure out the absolutely safest way of computing these risk factors. And so there were some assumptions that were made. And if you would, these are the worst case scenario. And before I go into them, I wanted to mention that these are things that really aren't happening, but this is the worst thing that could be imagined. so that number one is that everyone uses the river daily from May to October. And so I think there's probably very few people in this room that go into or are exposed to the river every single day in those period of months. Number two is that everyone has a yard along the river and uses that on a daily basis for access to the river. Number three, the amount of the submerged oil present in the river adjacent to that property is large. Conclusion is that contact with chemicals in the submerged oil will not cause long-term health effects or cause a larger than normal risk of cancer. Moving on to air monitoring here. As was mentioned earlier, there's continuing work with monitoring and sampling in the work areas in those residential areas near the submerged oil. The second point, samples are being taken in response to odor complaints. Again, there's a very good partnership that exists between Enbridge, the contractors, the government agencies and such to make sure that, again, public health is not compromised and your concerns are addressed. Number three, the air sampling data we have reviewed this year does not show any levels that would cause long-term health effects.
So sorry.
Moving on to fish, we were concerned earlier about the health and safety of the fish, but basically the fish from an upstream location that was not affected by the spill and two locations that were affected by the spill were collected. And basically what we found is that those fish did not have oil-related chemicals. That testing is going to be repeated. And in addition to that, if that ban or advisory was lifted or modified, you have to remember that the pre-existing advisories that covered the area of the Soresco impoundment and Morro Lake would still be in effect. If you needed further information, there's a lot of very good information at the website listed below, and we'll have it available at the breakout session following. And basically, this is the wind up here, is that at this point in time, the current restrictions on the use of Talmadge Creek and the Kalamazoo River remain in place. That concludes my presentation, and this is where you do that hearty round of applause.
All of us over in the session behind the curtains. We'll stick around and answer all your questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to be critical. All we ask is that you be respectful. Again, we'll stay here and we'll talk until they boot us out. And the last thing I'd like to say is, this time last year, I believe we were either prepping for or conducting a public meeting in Dow Creek. And at that public meeting, if I remember correctly, we were just introducing this concept of oil flakes, and we were calling them tar flakes in the Kalamazoo River. We were actually seeing them down near the Morro Lake Delta area. And so, again, just putting everything into context, that was the first indication that we were going to have this sub-oil or submerged oil problem. So a year later, now we're dealing with over 200 acres of this stuff. But again, we're committed to finishing the job, and we're going to stick around until this river is ready to be used for recreational and other purposes again. So with that, please join us over the other end. Again, feel free to ask questions and talk. Thank you.